Hey there YouTube, I'm Ikitsu, this is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Sins of a Solar Empire 2. So today we're talking about the Exoria Illuminator, which is a ship that I currently think is a little bit bad. It recently got nerfed, and there's a couple reasons that the particular nerf that hit it makes it kind of bad right now. It's not terrible, but it's not great either in the current state of things. So let's take a look at the stats here.
We are sworn to
So
avenge.
this has a durability of 300. It's got 1,400 shield points, 410 armor points, and 1,250 hull points. This is actually a pretty durable cruiser. It's not like super tough like a Cortova suppressor, but it actually has more hit points than something like a Harka heavy cruiser. So it's not a pushover as far as like its hit points goes. For damage, we're looking at the one medium beam there. Its base damage is 9 damage per second with 450 pierce, and has the two light beams at 4.2 damage per second with 400 pierce. These numbers are much higher because you do have to get a beam upgrade tech to get them unlocked in the first place. But we're going with the base numbers because that will sort of show us what the numbers we're working towards are going to be based off of. So what changed about this? It used to have 500 pierce prior to that last patch. This was a huge difference in terms of how much damage it does against capitals. It went from doing 9 damage per second to a capital ship, which is pretty good, down to 6 damage per second against a capital, which is the same as a Caliph. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem. They have a kind of similar role to the Caliph in that they're a non-missile anti-capital ship type of weapon. But now that they're doing that sort of 6 damage per second, let's take a look at the cost here. So the Exoria Illuminator costs 10 supply, it costs 500 credits, it costs 90 metal, and it costs 150 crystal. So it's doing the same damage as a Caliph, but it costs way more. In fact, it's doing a little bit less than the Caliph, because the Caliph also has that EMP shockwave attack that's capable of adding its damage a little bit better. Now, you do scale a bit better with the Exoria just because you've got real upgrades and the Caliph doesn't, but you're paying so much more for this that you're really inefficient. What you need to do is to get those light beams on target, but you can't focus them against the same thing that your medium beam is firing at, so you can't actually get that to work the way that you want it to. And since it's only 400 pierce, you're doing, even if you did somehow get both of those beams on target, 4.2 damage per second with with both of the light beams, which you're not going to get on that same target. So the Exoria is not really very good at damaging those sort of capitals anymore. Instead, what they've sort of made it into is a bit of a short-range brawler, which is weird because the Exoria is the Advent long-range missile ship, which it's not a missile ship, it fills the same functional role of having a high pierce, high damage weapon that's capable of firing from long distances. But because it's missing out on all of its all the damage per second by being at long range there, because you're not being able to fire those light beams at long distances, it ends up being incredibly inefficient at that sort of role. Once it gets close and is firing from all three of those, the fact that it's really tanky and can survive being up close kicks in. But you're paying for the fact that it's long range, and you're paying for the fact that the ship's kind of tanky. And I'm not sure that it's actually good enough to like survive cost-effective analysis if it's going for either one of those. And since they're mutually exclusive, you're getting a little bit of versatility, but you're not getting a good ship out of it. This is one of those ships where it's the opposite problem of the Tempest. The Tempest is too hyper-focused, the Exoria is a little bit too generalized. Where I would say that the Exoria is right now, you kind of want to be using it in the same sort of way as the Cortova Suppressor or the Harka, where it's going to go in close to an enemy blob of ships and it's going to blow away some of them, preferably other cruisers. The problem there is, against other cruisers, the Exorias are actually kind of the sort of thing you want to target with them. The Cortova Suppressor has got 300 pierce with its main gun. It's going through the durability of the Exoria Illuminator, and it's doing a lot more damage, 22 damage per second compared to the 10.3 or 9 base damage of the Exoria. So these guys get shredded in that exchange. It's not even close. Although they do also kind of shred the Cortova Suppressors if they're able to get those light beams to actually focus fire a secondary and tertiary target, but you probably won't. They'll probably be spread out amongst a bunch of different Cortova suppressors, in which case they're just going to regenerate everything. It doesn't really help out that much. So yeah, the Exoria, I don't think that their position is great right now because they're kind of mediocre to bad against pretty much every target that you could think of, with them being not really great into much of anything. and their sort of durability is too much at odds with their sort of long range. So for hidden statistics here, we're looking at 40 armor strength and 800 maximum speed. Those are all relatively okay there. Now, the other thing that made the Exorias bad, in my opinion, is the addition of the command ships. People have more 600 durability ships just out casually right now. And the Caliph has 600 Pierce on its gun, so you're looking at a situation where this has actually fallen behind in damage compared to the Caliph against a wide variety of targets that you're going to want to be able to take out. So the things that this thing does is it just, you can build a mass of them and you'll always be kind of mediocre at dealing with it. You'll never be good at dealing with anything with this, but you'll be okay at dealing with it. It can at least fight back. So there is some value in that if you just really don't know what to build. You could get Exoria Illuminators, but the other thing that really kills this for me right now is that the Aria drone host is in such a good place right now, and it does the role better. All the things that you want to be shooting these beams at, you can get more damage per second output for its cost by getting an Aria drone host and giving up bombers. And it's more versatile than the Exoria is because you can also equip it with the lighter fighters, and it becomes extremely good into things like corvettes, into things like frigates. The Exoria is better than most long-range missile ships into corvettes, but they're not good into corvettes, really. Not honestly. They can do some damage to them. Their side beams can help them out a little bit, but they're not capable of like actually finishing them off that quickly or that efficiently. Whereas the carrier is capable of really targeting down corvettes very, very efficiently. And they're better at focus firing down enemy capitals, even though you're doing half damage with that instead of 33% less with the Exoria. Your damage per second is still higher per supply for the Aria drone host than the Exoria Illuminator. The other ship that Advent have access to that's really, really strong right now is the Destras Crusader. The Destras Crusader is going to, into almost every enemy type, do more damage per supply than the Exoria is capable of doing. And the only ones where you would want the Exoria are ones that also destroy the Exoria, but have a hard time killing the Destras Crusader. That would be things like the Harka, that would be things like the Cortova Suppressor. Both of those guys really struggled to kill Destras Crusaders because the Destra is doing like huge damage to them. They've got their AoE attack that's capable of like splashing a whole bunch of those guys. They kill those things really, really quickly, and their 400 durability and their huge hit point pool, their good armor pool, makes it actually kind of difficult to kill a Destras Crusader with a Harka or with a Cortova Suppressor. By contrast, both of those have a really easy time killing the Exoria, even though the Exoria does kill them back at a relatively decent rate there. So yeah, there's not really very many situations right now where I would look at the Exoria and say that that's a ship that I want. It's a ship where I would choose it as a I can't really figure out what to build kind of ship because it's always going to be useful at the very least. But I even run into problems with it there because I do think that the Aria drone host is better as that. Now, one thing about this that does make it better than its two comparisons, the Counter-Arc Assailant and the Javelus, is it's not counterable. You can't get point defense to fire away at the beams that the Exoria is firing. So you're always going to be able to do damage with the Exoria. That's actually a pretty big positive. But I don't think that's enough to justify their extremely high cost, combined with their extremely low damage per second output. So, in any event, let's take a look at the hostility research. As you can see, there's no unique text for this thing, which is also interesting. If you look at both the Canrack and the Javelus, both of them have an additional attack that's actually adding to their damage per second by a little bit, but also makes it so that they're more likely to do damage through a situation where they're getting countered otherwise. There's nothing like that for the Exoria. You just sort of have to have it as is. In fact, Advent has got by far the fewest ships that have got a secondary ability that you can research, only having 3 of them, whereas I think everyone else has a pretty decent amount more than that. I think Tech has like 6, I think Visari has like 5. So Advent kind of probably could get something on the Exoria that adds to it, that makes it a little bit better. But yeah, they don't have anything quite like that there. Now, as far as upgrades, I think that the thing that you want for these guys first and foremost is actually your shield bonuses. If you get the extra damage from getting the beam upgrades, this does a little bit of damage from long range if it's just using the medium beam, but currently it's not getting anywhere near its money's worth if you're just using the medium beam. You have to be using the light beams as well, And to do that, you kind of have to drive straight into the enemy because you've got this sort of weird conversions where these medium beams are firing directly ahead and these other ones are firing off to the sides. You can sort of see the angle that would fire at is about like that kind of angle there. So if you just fly this straight into the enemy, it's going to take a lot of damage. It's going to be very vulnerable. It's going to get shot down. So having more shields is going to be useful. Having shield burst to help you against chip damage from enemy capitals, as well as from enemy area of effect abilities, all that sort of stuff. That's going to be quite useful for these guys as well. And if you're keeping them alive because they are fairly tough, then the shield burst can also come into play in those instances. After that, the beams are definitely important. I don't actually think the diffusion moderation is, in all honesty, that good for these guys in their current iteration. When they have got like higher damage per second on their medium beam, then they're a little bit better for this sort of style of play. But when you're in a situation where they have to use their side beams to actually be worth the money, then diffusion moderation falls off for them a little bit. Now, as far as substance goes, you're just looking at hit points and armor, and they do appreciate those. They do help them get back into the fight a little bit faster if they're hoping for a shield burst, or more consistently, rather, without dying while they're waiting for a recharge. But they're not your priority. I would say that you're focusing primarily on the energy stuff here. For Harmony research for Advent Reborn, you're looking at Protection of the Unity, giving you that shield regeneration in combat. This is going to be useful if you're up front and you're taking a lot of hits from area of effect as well, getting those subspace ruptures against you or what have you, or some sort of splash damage. This will help clear that up just a little bit there. But by far, Advent Wrath is the preferable one for these guys. 20% extra damage in the extreme late game is a pretty big boost to what this is capable of doing. The total damage for this is technically fine. 17.4 damage per second is kind of okay, until you remember that it's 18.8 on the Javelus, and the Javelus cost less. At which point you remember actually that maybe that's not great as far as damage goes. And since you're only actually doing like 9 against the target that you want to shoot at, and the rest of it's sort of scattering off only to get regenerated, because you need fire to be focused in this game for it to function. Like if you have secondary damage, it gets regenerated or shield bursted away. Because of that, those side beams are just really, really worthless because you can't get them to focus fire onto a side target on each side. So yeah, they're kind of running into that problem as well there. But yeah, that leads us, I guess, to Unity. If you are using these guys as a front combatant there, Cleanse is actually quite good for them. They do have a decent amount of like their hull points, their shield points, their armor points. So not only are they good targets for Cleanse to sort of delete one of them so that they heal up everything around them, but they also can regain quite a lot of hit points and toughness. And if there's a whole bunch of them that are kind of on low hit points for one reason or another, cleansing something that's a bit healthier is a great way to get them back on track there. If you've got a situation where you have to recall, then you can use recall with them. That sort of works. Sacrifice kind of works with these guys in the sense that, like, if you're getting swarmed by a whole ton of like corvettes or something like that, you could use sacrifice to clear those off because these guys don't do great into those. And after you've done that, you're left with like their tougher ships, which is what these guys want to fight. That kind of has some synergy, but it's so hard to actually get sacrifice to do the amount of damage that you need it to do, and not accidentally overkill and destroy all of your own stuff there, that it's not really worth the risk, in my opinion, for this ship here. The one that really matters is Resurrection. If you got a whole blob of these things you're playing as like Advent Reborn, you've got these guys as your main damage dealers, you're probably going to be losing quite a few of them. So it is worthwhile having these guys resurrected when that happens there. Advent Wrath is probably the group that's going to have the better synergy with their unity against with these guys here. So if you use Avatar, that's an extra 30% damage on these guys. That's huge for them. That's going to make them deal a respectable amount of damage, honestly. But if you're taking a look at Chastise, which you would normally expect to be really good with this type of ship here, it's not great necessarily because you do want to actually be in closer to the enemy there. What you can do with the Chastise ability is if you're up against a group of ships that are all like Harkas or they're Cortova suppressors, and you know for a fact that they're capable of dealing a lot of damage to you, and that you're dealing a lot of damage to them, it's a fight you still want to take. You can pop Chastise, use a few focus fires at extreme long range, even though you're getting diminished damage because you're not getting your full damage output against them. and knock out 3 or 4 of the enemy ships. Just focus fire them down before they can get close enough. And once they get in close enough to start firing, you rush in closer. But that Chastise opens up the ability to kill off a couple enemy ships before they get in range there, and before you start doing the honest exchange of fire, at which point you've hopefully thinned out enough of their numbers from that focus fire that you're now on top of the fight. You're going to start winning that fight a little bit harder. A lot of fights in this game are actually really like snowbally. Once you start winning it harder and harder and harder until your enemy just has to retreat or they're just gone and can't recover. So being able to get that initial advantage can help quite a bit for the Exoria in that situation there. The last one, of course, is Fury. Technically speaking, being able to just do a big AoE damage blob against the enemy can help the Exoria quite a bit, because those side beams, if they're firing at light targets that are on low hit points, it can finish them off. And having big AoEs and having AoE damage is one of the few ways that the Exoria can actually get that to happen. So it's possible to get a little bit of value out of that kind of thing there, but I wouldn't necessarily rely on it too much. It would be a little bit difficult to get that to be consistent. I do think Avatar is going to be your best bet with these guys. That huge damage spike working on all their lasers is just quite a bit better, but otherwise they're not necessarily that great at that sort of thing. So anyhow, that's pretty much everything there is about the Exoria. I have a couple things that I think are going on here. So if you take a look at the Exoria and you look at its damage values and you look at like all 3 of them put together, its damage is quite good. And since you can't counter it, it definitely does need to have lower damage relative to the Javelus or the Canrack Assailant. However, because it costs more than the Javelus and it costs more than the Canrack, I think you can get away with it having a little bit more damage than it actually does right now, because those side beams, again, are not firing at the target you want them to fire at. What's worse is, because they're now like suffering a little bit more from the tougher targets that are out there, as well as their inability to pierce capitals, they're getting outscaled really, really badly in terms of their damage, not just a little bit like it was before. We're actually at the point where even if you could converge all of the beams onto a single target and fire everything into one capital directly in front of you, you would actually be still getting outdamaged by the cheaper ship, which is the Javelus. And you would actually be doing a pretty comparable amount of damage to a Canrack Assailant, which is much cheaper than you, because the Canrack Assailant has got 500 Pierce. So you're running into a situation with this thing pretty rapidly where it's clear that its damage is just not as good as the other ships out there. So there's a couple of different things I think that they would want to do with this. One, they should decide whether or not it's meant to run into the enemy fleet and fire all of its beams at whatever. In which case, they can clip its range by a whole bunch, make it way cheaper. In which case, it's no longer a long-range missile type ship. It's now a very fragile type of Harka, or a fragile type of Cortova suppressor. It's not that fragile even. But you've got like 300 durability, which is not enough to really fulfill that role. Maybe you give it like a 350 durability or something like that. Shorten its range by a bunch, make it 8 supply, make it cheaper, especially in terms of like crystal. And at that point in time, you've got something that can like just run in and do a bunch of damage up close. Or if you do want it to be a long-range missile type ship that's capable of doing some damage, I think that you could have like a focused beam as an upgradable ability for these guys, where not necessarily 100% of the time, like you activate it and then for like some amount of time, some duration, they focus the fire from all of their weapons through the central channel here, and they deal some amount of damage with all 3 of their beams going through that one thing. It can be less than the total sum of like all of them add together. Instead of it being like a 17.2 damage per second, you could have it be something like, say, 14 damage per second, which would put it into a category where it's kind of okay at its role of a long-range missile type ship there. And you could even make that a toggle where it's like it's doing way more damage if you are up close and you are using all 3 beams against a bunch of different targets, but you're getting more damage against a single target if you're doing that long-range sort of siege mode. That could be an answer to if you want this to be a long-range missile equivalent. And having the toggle would also make it so that it fulfills that role of being versatile, being able to switch back and forth between the roles of being a close-range brawler or a long-distance type of sniper unit. I think, though, if you also look at it like right now, the light beam damage is pretty low, and you're spreading it against 2 targets. being able to do 4.2 damage per second against like side targets, it really feels awkward. I definitely think that the numbers on this thing are just bad in general right now too. So yeah, the nerf really clipped this. The nerf really screwed it over in context of like other ships being really powerful relative to it, and it's just not in a good space right now. It being uncounterable in the sense that you can't just PD against it is one of the reasons why it is the way it is, but you've also got the fact that you can counter it because you could just take literally the thing that makes it so your capital ships take way less energy weapon or beam damage. So there are actually things that can just kind of hard counter this too out there. It's just they're a little bit more obtuse. So I don't actually really like where this is right now. I would probably like it more, though, if the Area Drone Host and the Destra Crusader got nerfed, but I think at that point in time what I would have to do is just capital spam, which is boring, but it is probably what I would have to do. In any event, though, that is our look at the Exoria Illuminator. I think it's not great right now, but I definitely think it's also usable. It's just not usable in the role that I would want to see it in. In any event, though, that's going to be our video for today. Hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.